How many times have you thought, wow, that mod looks fun, and then you're just greeted with, right, okay, let's try something else. Okay. Why does this game not want to work? I think this video has been a long time coming for me because there is an absolute disaster plaguing the Bannerlord community that is only frustrating because of the unlimited potential for absolute greatness. And that is the modding scene. There's a wealth of time eras, battles to be fought and stories to be told, yet all of it gets just lost in the dark art of an engine that rejects code faster than me talking to a girl in a nightclub. This is a story about netcode, warring developers, and even a legal battle between modders themselves. So, am I making this video as a service to the community, to bring peace and justice between factions and developer nonsense, or just because my game crashed one too many times when I was trying to record a video and it put me in a bad mood? Guilty on both accounts. But away from protecting yourself on the battlefield, this video is sponsored by Surfshark VPN. Actually, a service that I have used for the last 3-4 years outside of the sponsorship. I work a lot from cafes, and it means that I'm on public Wi-Fi, which can be a little bit dodgy. Getting myself on Surfshark VPN means that I am protected at all times, and nobody can sneak in to watch what I'm doing. But also, not just that. Look, I love the Mission Impossible series, and I can watch 1, 2, and 3 on the UK Netflix, but the rest aren't there. But, oh, if I just connect to Surfshark VPN, connect to Mumbai, India, well, look at this! I've now got the rest of the Mission Impossible series. Yeah, that's actually what I mainly use this for. You can actually test it out for absolutely no risk. There's a 30-day money-back guarantee as well, which is, well, incredible. So head to surfshark.com/ResidentVPN for extra 4 months of Surfshark, and you help support the channel as well. Click the link in the description or just type in the URL on screen. After Bannerlord's early access release in 2020 and its full release in 2022, the next job for the community was to find where it stood. The Napoleonic Wars stuff had been great in the first warband, maybe even the Lord of the Rings content. Could that be brought into Bannerlord? Oh, hell yes, it could. Or at least they wanted to do it. And so far, there has been some good stuff. There is Napoleonic Wars mods, and there are Lord of the Rings mods. I mean, I love stepping in line with my men, firing into hordes of oncoming enemies. It's never been so satisfying. Right, men, line up. Oh my god, look at my British army. They look amazing. Less grenades, you're gonna hit me. You're going to hit... Stop, lads, stop it. Oh my god. Or Del Arte Della Guerra, the War of the Roses mod. I actually cannot get over how good this thing. It causes grown men to have fizzy pants. And yes, I am those grown men. I don't completely understand it either, but look at that. Look at this bit. Look at that armor. Look at the castle. The siege engine. Oh god, that's satisfying. On the outside, it seems to all be going well, right? The modding community seems to really be thriving. But to fully understand the issues, we need to have a look at the history of modding with this franchise and why and where it all started. In the early days of Mount & Blade, I'm talking 2005 to 2010, this is the first game, there was actually quite a lot of community-made mods, which you'd be surprised by because it was a very, very primitive game. The original Mount & Blade, releasing in 2008, was developed by Tailwords to be this sandbox, but the fact that they gave players this much freedom meant that a modular design and accessible codebase really made it friendly to the people that wanted to see a little bit more. The first mods that began emerging were things like The Last Days, a total conversion is set in, well, Middle-earth, and Sword of Damocles, which was kind of your first kingdom management kind of mod. There was also a native expansion which took the vanilla and gave it new content, challenges, new arms and armor, and of course, troop trees. These were kind of basic for the time, other than The Last Days of the Third Age. That was actually insane. But all of this was leading into something a lot bigger when Warband came about in 2010. You see, Mount & Blade Warband offered a bigger scale, a bigger map, and a new faction, the Saronids, if anybody didn't know. And because of this, it gave so much more options for larger scale mods. Prophecy of Pendor, a legendary fantasy mod with deep lore and unique mechanics. Brighton Walder, this focused on the dark age of Britain with, well, the Vikings, and was later taken up by Tailwords and released as an official DLC as the Viking Conquest. Perhaps one of the most underrated DLCs that Tailwords have ever set foot on. The Florist mod pack expanded. Oh my god, this was kind of the next iteration of native expansion for the original Mount and Blade. But Florist mod pack for Mount and Blade Warband was such a comprehensive overhaul, combining multiple mods into a polished package. It was kind of the first mod pack, if you will, for a Mount and Blade game. And I spent so long playing mods for Warband. I mean, one of my favorite was Blood in the West. Look, I understand it was awful in terms of actually adding in content, but it had elves and it had Gondorian archers and it had Minas Tirith and you could fight. It was fantastic. But that wasn't the only thing that Warband added in. No. Warband also had in multiplayer. It was the first time that the Mount and Blade franchise had other players fighting against each other in massive 200-player scale battles, whether it's sieges or pitched land battles. Because of this, a community started making shield battles with regiments and clans lining up, playing as archers or infantry, cavalry or artillery, and making sure that they were following the rules, but still slaughtering the enemy. And because of this, there were mods that came with it. Whether it was Mountain Gladius that soon turned into March of Rome, where people were lining up in Roman formations trying to do their own testudos, or even later on the Lord of the Rings mod that, I mean, I played so much of this. I had one of the first clans in this Lord of the Rings mod, and the Battle of Osgiliath charging across the plains of Pelennor and eventually getting slaughtered within the ruins was a lot of fun. You also had Full Invasion 2, which added in horde modes of every single person on the same team, co-op fighting against waves and waves of AI. And then there was Persistent World, one of the most mind-blowing mods, pioneering multiplayer roleplay with an open-world game within Mount and Blade Warband. And it grew that game to the scale that it is today, with having a Napoleonic Ward mountain musket mod for multiplayer, then being, once again, picked up by Tailwords and made into an official DLC. This grew the multiplayer community tenfold. And that brings us into Bannerlord, because that was a bigger modding community than I have ever seen in anything other than like a Skyrim. And it was multiplayer based as well, which feels so rare in this day and age. So when Bannerlord came out, all the modders from the previous Warband and the community that were coming with it expected to see the similar type of things within the second game. But it never came. Years after its release, there weren't any official modding tools, and even when they weren't exactly what were needed in order to recreate the initial titles. That meant that mods were being released, but they were buggy. They were crashing constantly. They wouldn't work with each other, and the limitation of the scale had to be scoped into something a lot more focused, which, you know, has its positives sometimes, but never really reached the scale of what Warband had. Let's take one of the biggest mods from Mount and Blade 2 Bannerlord. Okay, Eagle Rising. This was our Roman mod, and it's still going really healthily to this day, adding in things like the Dacians, the Scythians, the Carthaginians. You now have to play it with the realistic battle mode, and then it crashes every time because the Europe map has to be in there as well. Doesn't quite know how to get that working. It works sometimes, and that's probably the best that I could say for a mod like that. It is fantastic when I can actually play it. And there is no blame to the modders themselves. And in fact, perhaps not even Tailwords as developers. Their main focus was bringing out a sequel to an incredibly popular game. And Bannerlord had so much hype behind it, they had to nail it. They brought it out early access, probably a bit earlier than they would have liked to, but all their focus was on the vanilla game and getting that working exactly how they wanted to with the content that they required. But that meant that the focus on the community and building up that side of it was just left for a long time. And by the time that it came out, it still was not exactly in the most refined state. So something started to happen. Modders in the Mount and Blade 2 Bannerlord community decided to get together, and they wrote an open letter to Tailwords a couple years ago. In general, the preface of this letter was how the modding community was frustrated. After nearly a year of early access at the time and about 30 patches, there is still a misalignment with how they feel Tailwords' priority should be and the modders' needs. Artificial roadblocks in the game's code prevented large-scale mods, as mentioned, and Tailwords focused on expanding the base game instead of creating a polished modular foundation just didn't sit right with these modders themselves. And okay, that's completely fair, and I understand where the modders are coming from, because this is very much a one-sided thing. I can understand why Tailwords would also say that's a load of bollocks. However, there was a huge lack of documentation at the time, actually explaining how this custom engine that Tailwords have made really works properly, the systems and the implementation, increasing time and effort for modders to understand these features, leading to a lot of bad practice, which you can see yourself by the fact that every mod that you need to download, you need to put on the Harmony mod just so things might work. Not should work, but might work. It just gives it a better chance of working, which is insane to me. Some of the hard-coded behaviors were inaccessible. For example, the map size and campaign behaviors just couldn't be accessed by modders. This was kind of understandable from Tailward's perspective because they didn't want you to make a free game out of their already established game. But they did mention during development that they give modders all this access and it just wasn't as accessible as they would have liked. The modders requested some changes with improved documentation, remove hard coding, and minimize the uses of internal keywords. If anybody's outside of, the modding space, as far as I'm aware, this means that Tailward's made their own custom engine. They use specific keywords that only they know because it's not a widely spread and universal coding language, which it would have been if it was something on Unreal Engine 4. Not just this, but providing a roadmap of features and prioritization on board for modders and players. This was all signed by some of the biggest mods ever: the Lord of the Rings Kingdoms of Ardar, the Warhammer Old World, and the Sword and Musket mod, which is the Napoleonic Wars mod. And it seemed like it kind of started to shift things. The releases that later came from Tailwards were adding in more mod integration, and every single patch we have now has its own section about what they've changed about the modding support. And we've started to see larger and larger scale mods. After that is when we got the European maps. After that is when we got the wider expansion to things like Eagle Rising. Okay, Kingdoms of Ardar, that's still... nobody knows where that mod is. It should still be coming. But most of the other mods did go up another scale. But that caused its own issues. You see, modding in Mount & Blade 2 Bannerlord has a lot of different factions. Everybody wants the community to play their specific mod, which is fine if you make something unique and tangible for people to actually jump onto. But if you make a copy of another mod, or if you just make something that's pretty generic, you're splitting up the player base tenfold. To give an example, we had two Napoleonic Wars mods that were trying to fight over the same player base. Because of this, they kind of started a bit of a feud with each other. And then one of them was accused of stealing assets. That was resolved later on down the line, but that brings us to the persistent mods. I mean, the modding scene has only been out for a couple of years now, and we've already had Persistent Bannerlord, Persistent Empires, about 4 other persistent style mods. Honestly, if you go onto Steam Workshop, there's about 50 of them. These were the sequel to the Persistent World mod for Warband that I spoke about, an open world RPG multiplayer title that drew in such a huge community back in the day. Clans warring over castles, moving up ranks, and diplomacy between players. And because that was so successful, it was only a matter of time before it was recreated within Bannerlord. And when Persistent Empires came out, it was successful for some time. But then somebody kind of got frustrated with the server owners. It was only a first-party server, ironically, for the mod, meaning that people couldn't create their own. So somebody made Persistent Bannerlord, a new Persistent World mod, because they just wanted more freedom and they wanted to add more things in. That game died. And now they've added like 2 or 3 more. Problem is, if somebody makes a successful mod, somebody else wants to recreate it. They want that community for themselves and they want the power in order to change things as they see fit. But all that does is ruin the modding community because it splits up a player base who don't know where the central point. If they like open world mods, they don't know which one to play now because there's about 4 of them to try out. If they like Napoleonic Wars mods, I don't know, there's about 3 or 4 Napoleonic Wars mods. Which one is everyone playing on? And all of this has led to the point of such a fragmented community where there are so many different modifications for the same thing with player bases split everywhere. The ones that do work keep crashing because every time Tailwards bring out a new update, they have to fix it. I mean, I'm trying to get the Serve as a Soldier mod on. I put in every patch that I could possibly find on their Discord, on their website, and none of it seems to work. It is such a disjunct and unstable game for mods that actually growing a solid community around it seems tantamount to impossible. So is this something that can be fixed in time? Well, I think there are a few things that need to happen. I think there needs to be more communication from Tailwards. We've not had updates for a long time, and especially for the modding community. I think modders themselves need to put their ego to the side, and instead of trying to make their own thing better than the last, just join together. Make one mod for each time era, for each gameplay style, and each game mode, and make that the best it can be. Because the amount of fractures that we've had so far, having one successful Lord of the Rings mod, having one successful Persistent Bannerlord mod, rather than 3 or 4 kind of mediocre or rubbish ones. But until then, I don't think anything will change. Are you part of the modding community, or are you just sort of looking in on the sidelines? Or are you new to the Mount & Blade community and haven't even started modding yourself? Let me know down in the comments below. But until then, I will see you in the next one.